Hello, and welcome to the Geopolitics Explained podcast. Last episode, I discussed Thucydides' trap and the fourth turning framework. These pieces of work support the trend that we are currently seeing unfold in our geopolitical interactions becoming more zero-sum. In such interactions, the gain of one nation is equal to the loss of another. Today, I'm going to explore if we can stop this trend. Can we stop zero-sum interactions from potentially escalating into negative-sum interactions? And if so, how can we do this? One big factor that is contributing to the rise of zero-sum and negative-sum interactions is a lack of balance. Ultimately, positive-sum games in geopolitics require balance, but crises are all about imbalance. Eliminating zero-sum dynamics completely is an unrealistic pursuit. So I seemingly could wrap the episode up there, but I do question if there are any other options that we have, rather than just attempting to live through these zero-sum interactions, potentially escalating into negative-sum interactions. Alternatively, could we create solutions that help those who enter into zero-sum or negative-sum environments to survive and to emerge stronger coming out of the other side? The first potential strategy that I'd like to discuss is where we can build global resilience. For global superpowers of today, they are attempting to build resilience in areas where they are currently declining or where they are at a disadvantage relative to other nations. This is seen in Trump's pursuit of rare earths and in his boost to domestic manufacturing. But as a result of this, other nations with less power are then losing out. These nations also have to build their own individual defensive capabilities, establish secure supply chains to access necessities, and maintain options. Mark Carney's speech at Davos was received largely positively, but some did look upon it negatively because the middle powers now have to take action. Despite the relationship between superpowers and middle powers having the potential to resemble a zero-sum game, the relationships between middle powers themselves can still be positive sum. This could be seen through joint technological innovation, through trade deals, such as we are potentially seeing with the European Union and Mercosur. Middle powers can also maintain relations that are positive sum through diplomacy, through investment, through infrastructure build-out, and through financial coordination. That's not to say that reaching this environment of positive sum interactions wouldn't be without struggle, but the middle powers could emerge from this period of tension slightly stronger if they were to navigate this transition successfully. However, navigating this transition successfully is a big ask, especially when these middle powers currently occupy the negative end of zero-sum relations with the United States across a range of different aspects of geopolitics. Also, as the United States positions itself in seeking to gain more individual resiliency, I do question if China could position itself as an actor of greater global resilience. We already saw the potential for Canada to lean towards China, despite Carney recently pulling back and stating that he wouldn't pursue a free trade deal with China. Still, I believe this was a test from China. China could position itself as a global geopolitical player as the United States attempts to build its own fortress in the Western Hemisphere. Another potential strategy that I want to discuss as we seek to create solutions for those who enter into zero-sum or negative-sum environments is where nations can cooperate in areas where escalation would be catastrophic. In our world today, hybrid warfare ensures that nations can be at war without being in a hot war. We've seen the United States confiscate dollar reserves and impose tariffs, while other nations have imposed export controls and destroyed infrastructure, such as Nord Stream and the Novokakova Dam. This strategy of hybrid warfare would mirror Cold War crisis management, but back then the United States wasn't in relative decline. This time, I question if the United States could be incentivized to stay away from areas of zero-sum interactions where it feels like it can be the positive payoff. The final solution that some analysts have discussed is a spheres of influence strategy that would involve the United States, China, and Russia. This would be uncomfortable for many, but ultimately it is a strategy that needs to be considered because we are seeing Donald Trump attempt to gain control over North and South America as his sphere of influence. This would limit nations with less power, of course, but between the superpowers, this world would reduce the incentive for total dominance. It would help limit zero-sum escalation between superpowers, but ultimately to the detriment of those nations with less power. Now, I don't believe that this is a solution to the fact that we are trending towards more geopolitical interactions becoming zero-sum. I think the strongest potential solution is building resilience, especially amongst nations with less power. But the reality is, we are rooted in a zero-sum world, and because of the power imbalance during this period of crisis, we can't stop this from happening. This highlights that in our geopolitical world today, power and the prevalence of realism continue to rise. The global superpowers have cards that they can play. These cards could be technological, they could be geographic advantages, capital market strength, soft power, hard power, or strong supply chain control. Many other cards also exist, but the most important point is that these cards give nations options. For nations with less power, they have to acquire options, because any nation without options declines. In an optimistic light, these nations with less power would gain from positive sum interactions with each other. But in this realist world, they would likely be subject to their own negative sum interactions at the hands of superpowers, even if the middle powers attempted to seek more cooperation with each other. We also saw, in reality, there could be some small pockets of interaction between middle powers, but the likely result would be that some nations with even less power than middle powers would lose out. We saw this at the onset of the Russia-Ukraine war. Europe was rushing to fill its natural gas storages after disconnecting from Russian supplies, and it was other nations, such as Bangladesh and Pakistan, that were outbid on LNG cargoes and hence experienced energy shortages. So, nations have to build global resilience, but this ultimately means that nations with less power will be the most susceptible to damage and further strain. Despite the strongest solution that I can come up with being cooperation between middle powers, in a world that is more geopolitically tense, there are still some areas where middle powers are fighting in zero-sum games. We're seeing Israel and Turkey fight for influence in Syria. We've also seen recent events in Yemen, with the UAE being expelled by Saudi Arabia. There are many other examples, and this battle for influence is clearly set to continue because states are self-interested. To reiterate, no nation wants to be on the losing side of these interactions, and this requires nations to have strengths, options, or cards that they can play. Those that don't have cards will decline relative to other powers, or they have to pivot and seek to renew or acquire new strengths. In an episode that sought solutions to this problem, I apologise that there aren't many, if any. It does appear that these tense zero-sum games are set to continue as nations look to acquire or consolidate their options in the chaos that's currently unfolding. The biggest question as we look forward is whether anybody can still create positive sum interactions, and if they can, at what scale will these unfold? Ultimately, this is a question that will be answered with time. Over the next few weeks, I'm looking to discuss scenarios that could unfold in Greenland as we move forward. This is despite the conversation surrounding Greenland now being out of the news flow, with different stories emerging, such as tensions surrounding Iran. I still don't believe the situation surrounding Greenland is over, and so it's that we'll be discussing in upcoming weeks. That's all for today. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review on the podcast platform of your choice. I've been Dylan, and I'll talk to you next time.